underdogs, underestimated, we the ones.
Hey, welcome everybody back to the Underdogs, where we try to figure out why unlikely things happen and how maybe you can make some money off of it. I am so pleased to have as our special guest this episode this week, KC Joyner. You know him as the football scientist. You read his Pay Dirt newsletter. If you don't, you should. He's been working on the science of fantasy football for, I think we can say decades, right? It's decades. And and now that we have him on video, you can see the walls of videotape. What's the oldest tape behind you? Do those tapes go back to the 80s? They must.
The first one would go back to 1990. I have worked with tape traders over the years, though, to get some tapes from the 80s and such. So there's a lot of things. Yeah, going way back in the day.
We're on tape trading markets. Well, we'll analyze the efficiency of the tape trading markets another time. We're going to talk some fantasy football now, as my compañera Jordan Brenner is traveling. So Godspeed, Jordan. We'll try to make sure there's a spot for you when you get back. Casey, you've been doing this so long that something that interests me is you have a historical perspective in your work that isn't always present in some other fantasy football analytics. I was looking at some numbers. If you look 20 years ago, Peyton Manning, landslide MVP with 29 touchdowns, 4,200 yards thrown, numbers that would look good today, but nowhere near as exceptional as they were back then, when it was very rare for a quarterback to have 260 or 270 fantasy points in a season. Now that's become kind of routine, and you have Patrick Mahomes, cracking 400 points. So let me ask you to start, how has the shape of scoring changed over the years, and how should we think about our drafts differently because of that? Is there any argument left, with so many quarterbacks performing so well, for taking a quarterback at the very top of your fantasy draft, for example, even if it's Patrick Mahomes?
The big thing is, the big difference or reason that's happened, quarterback values have changed. Like, there's 12 quarterbacks last year put up 270 points. It's not that long ago when, okay, if you were getting 250 out of a quarterback, maybe 300, you were happy. You have to now, to keep up as a quarterback arms race, you have to get one with 270. If you don't get one of those top 12 and you're trying to win a league where you've got a guy put up 240, 230, not happening, probably not. But the big thing is passing inside the 10-yard line. Go to Pro Football Reference. Look back in 1994, the first year that they tracked passing inside the 10-yard line, where they have that sort of statistic. 5 quarterbacks passed for 10 or more touchdowns, and Steve Young leads the league at 22. Drew Bledsoe is second with 14. Shift that forward up to 2022. Again, 5 quarterbacks with 10 or more. This past year, you're talking there are 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12 quarterbacks with 10 or more. And you're talking Mahomes at 29, Goff at 20, Brady at 18, Cousins at 16. Yeah, 29.
Wow, so almost 30. Wow,
yeah.
Wow. And a whole list behind them.
Yep.
Casey, that gets right to one of the questions I want to ask you. You're looking at 10 yards or fewer there, right? So short touchdown passes.
Yep.
Whether or not you're in PPR, okay, even if you're in standard scoring, our research, the stuff that Jordan and I have looked at, indicates that those short passes or short touchdowns and the ability of receivers to catch the ball and possessions count a lot more. Even if you're not in a PPR league, they're more predictive, and they seem to be more valuable than if you assemble a squad full of like long bomb throwers. Is that fair to say?
Consistent. I go back to something Bear Bryant said way back in the day. His goal line defense, people ask him, why are you so good at goal line defense? He said, I forced the other team to pass. He said, because so many things can go wrong. And for many years, that was right. That was a smart thing to do. Now teams get to the 5-yard line, they don't have any problem asking a lot of quarterbacks to pass. I mean, you're looking at Jared Goff throwing 20 touchdown passes inside the 10 last year. It's a situation that used to work because the compressed field and offenses weren't that good. But now quarterbacks and passing have become so adept that if you say to them, we're going to go ahead and force you to run the ball near the goal line, they don't even care, which is why you're getting quarterbacks putting up those sorts of points. And because they know there's a compressed field and you're going to have safeties naturally closer to the line, and you're automatically going to be running into a loaded box, they want to throw anyway most of the time. So
that's something I want. That's something I want all of our listeners and viewers to keep in mind at each of the positions we talk about, that these short touchdowns, that basically the replacement of a large chunk of the running game with a short passing game, That matters everywhere. That matters for quarterbacks amassing points. It matters for running backs because you need guys who can catch the ball. It matters for wide receivers because it means you tilt towards possession receivers away maybe from the bomb catchers, the bomb receivers. And it matters with tight ends too, because certain tight ends are almost automatic options. So that's something we should keep in mind at each position. Let's take quarterbacks first. Is there someone, because of that short passing skill, would jump up the charts? If you look at those numbers, maybe somebody people are not recognizing as a short but deadly passing threat when you get down to that red zone that people should keep in mind for their fantasy drafts.
Jared Goff, last year, he posted a 23-1 touchdown to interception ratio in short passes. That's passes throwing 10 or fewer yards. 23-1. He's done that before. He's posted 20 touchdowns in that area before. And I think people kind of look at him and say, okay, well, last year might have been a fluke for him. He's not a guy you can really count on. He was a product of the Bay offense. This is a guy who can excel in that area. And we're talking he was second in the league in passing touchdowns inside the 10-yard line. So it's a guy I don't think gets the credit for being that type of player on those sorts of passes, which really pushes his fantasy value probably higher than people think it would be.
How much attention do you have to pay to where players are already being drafted, in that you publish a number of preseason updates, one coming out today, if I'm not mistaken. And you have to keep updating this stuff. And I'm wondering how much the market moves in these guys' ADP, or average draft positions. In other words, you can probably, with your eyes closed, figure out who's undervalued compared to last year's stats. You know, who's going to regress in what categories, who's going to exceed expectations. But we've found across many different fields, whether it's college basketball or, various football categories, that the market is catching up with that kind of analysis very fast, And so, for example, we might all fairly easily agree that the Chicago Bears are going to do better than they did last year. There's a load of reasons why. But the Vegas line on the Bears is already 7.5 wins. Are they going to do more than 4 wins better? You know what I mean? So how much do these guys fluctuate, and how far does the market catch up to the kind of analysis you would have been doing just a few years ago?
I published the first edition of my draft guide this year on July 27th. And at that time, was looking at quarterback ADPs on Fantasy Pros. And you were seeing, you've got Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen. And it's those three. Mahomes is first and the other two. But you were seeing them head off the board, some of them in second and the third round. You were able to get, my initial recommendations were, you can get Allen in the third, you can get Hurts in the third, you might have to take Mahomes in the second. Now, you'll get the ADPs as of right now, as of today. You've got Mahomes at 14, Allen at 18, Hurts at 22. If you're in a 10-team league, Hurts makes it to round 3. But if you're in a 12-team league, which is the way I base these rankings off of, they're all 3 second-round picks. I mean, now you're not going to get out of the second round without getting these people. And I think people are now, what's happened is fantasy managers are realizing that, hey, these guys have the capacity to put up 370, 400 points. They have the capacity to put up a type of ceiling that you couldn't get out of quarterbacks until the last couple of years or so. And I think
who's that justified for? Like, look, since last Super Bowl, I think we're all now aware we're watching a Hall of Famer on the field, maybe upper tier Hall of Famer with Mahomes on the field, and he's capable of scoring 400 points. Is he the only guy you'd say that's justified for? Or you think it's also justified to pick Hurts or Allen that high, second round, heading toward the first round in a 12-team league?
There's only 417 but 4 points last season. Mahomes is now the only quarterback in league history to score 400+ points in 2 seasons. He's the only one to do it twice. He's got a capacity to do it a third time. 17 games, maybe the other 2 can't, but I'm still thinking Mahomes is the guy who can make it to 400. I think he's still a half step up from those other 2. I think they're all elite. I want one of those 3 on my teams in just about every league I'm in. I want to get one of those 3 because they're difference makers in a way that maybe not quite at a Kelsey level, but pretty darn close. Every other position, you can get the next guy down from that, but the tier drops in those 3 down pretty significantly after that. And by the way, Hurts, if you look at the passing numbers for the Eagles, I think they're going to pass them on more this year. It's rare that that's better for a rushing quarterback to switch to passing and make it work. I think he's one of the few who can do it. So I think he could push very close to 400.
So the usual suspects has that top trio. Keep an eye on Jared Goff for the short game in the red zone. Let's talk about running backs. KC, I've got an argument I've been making to people. Seems to be getting pretty popular. I want to see what you think. You want to get running backs young before they got a lot of wear and tear on them. You want to drop them into a situation, if possible, where they get good blocking. You want to drop them into a situation, if possible, where there's a run-heavy offense. Why is Bijan Robinson not the first running back taken, maybe the first overall pick? Is he not just primed to walk through the doors and at the other end of the building, blow the doors off?
I agree with you. I was just having a discussion with some people at the Athletic about talking about, hey, there's a case for Bijan to be the #1 pick overall, just period, with some of the question marks with McCaffrey and Eckler. And they're talking, mind you, it's all nitpicky arguments. I mean, those guys are top 3 of the draft, and no matter what. But yeah, you could. The problem for Robinson is that his coach recently came out and said, okay, he's got to earn his spot. He's still technically not the #1 player on their draft board. It makes me wonder if they're thinking, okay, maybe we got to see how he can adjust and such. And Tyler Algier, by the way, last year was 9th in the league in my good blocking yards per attempt metric, which says how productive you are when you get good blocking. So I think they're going to go. I mean, most teams just say we're going to make him a bell cow. I think they can say, well, we'll make him a lead back and use Algier as an alternate. We have that capacity there. It's the only argument I could really make against him. And the Falcons' O-line is also banged up. But I'm of the mindset that I might take Robinson first about #1 pick in the draft.
How much difference does the passing game that you just were talking about a couple of minutes ago make in differentiating among the other very top choices? I mean, Eckler or McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley. Some of the top running backs function as pass catchers down near the scoring opportunities. Some don't so much. Does that affect things, or is it just we should just look at straight up rushing stats?
I like backs who can do those other things because I think if you get a back slotted out, if you're getting a McCaffrey going out to play a slot receiver for X number of plays, he's getting away from the wear and tear he's going to take in the box. So you can stay healthier if you're shifting. You're getting a running back, say, 60, 70, 80 targets. He might not get quite as many rushing attempts, but he's going to get overall as many touches. He's still going to get as much production, more than likely, to get him out in space, and he's one of those talented guys. So I kind of like those situations for those backs, because if you try and give somebody 300 carries inside, between the tackles and such, you're trying to give him 300 rush attempts, that's going to wear him down faster than 300 touches if he's getting 80 receptions.
Are there any situations that people are overlooking when it comes to running backs? I mean, the Eagles always come out as one of the top one or two best offensive lines. Now, they say they're passing more, they have a running quarterback, but that seems like an awfully good situation. Are there other situations where you would look around the league and say maybe people aren't drafters aren't valuing them as high as they should?
Chicago last year ranked tied for 3rd in my good blocking rate metric. It's how often an offense gets its ball carriers quality run blocking. And backs are 6 times as productive on good blocking carries as they are on bad blocking carries. I wrote about all this in an article at The Athletic, Advanced Run Blocking Metrics article. And I don't think that people are looking at the Chicago running backs and thinking, hey, these backs can be this good. And by the way, Chicago has the most favorable rush defense schedule in the league, too, this year. So you're adding a really good offensive line, and they added another tackle in the draft, and you've got 3 backs who are really low-cost draft prospects. I think you can stack up those guys for later in the draft and not have to put much draft capital in there and get shares of the Chicago running game that you're going to be happy you got.
Who's the guy? Is there a guy going to emerge, or is this just going to be a situation where they're going to all get a share for a while?
I think it's going to be committee, I think, is what they're going to go with. I like Herbert the most right at the moment because he has done things. He has done well. He posted an 8.9 yards per good blocking carry last year. My good blocking yards per attempt, that's 0.7 over league average, which is 8.2. So I like him. He has a proven track record. He'd be the guy I'd want to start. But I think they're going to see how Johnson adjusts into the season, and so that's the only thing down on Johnson. But again, I would just stack them. I would just say, hey, I can get 2 or 3 of these backs. I wouldn't mind stacking all 3, but I'd get at least 2 of these backs, and you can get them for 10th, 11th round draft picks. You can get them in the back end of a draft, and it costs next to nothing. And if one of them doesn't work out, just stash them on the bench or drop them, and then maybe pick them back up on waivers. But I think you're going to be happy you had them because they're going to give you some quality starts between them.
There's various metrics that can explain the breakouts of wide receivers. We've talked about quarterbacks. It seems to me it's a little harder to figure out what correlates with breakout performances coming from wide receivers. What do you look at when you say who's going to be so much better than anyone expected at the wideout spot?
I'd like to see a receiver who can play multiple positions. Coaches would rather just play an X or the Z, rather you're playing a split end or the flanker, that you can move around to those different positions. I also like to see, you want to get vertical productivity. I like to see productivity all depth levels, short, medium, and deep, or short, vertical and stretch verticals, what I call them. I want to see production at all those levels, but I really want to see I'll tell you the thing that I think people don't take as much into account is how durable are you? Like Christian Watson, to give an example. Christian Watson is going as a 3. People think he's going to be just as productive as he was last year, including his college career. 4 years at North Dakota State, he's caught 146 passes total for his entire 5 seasons. 146.
That's a pretty wild number.
I'm like, how do you project this guy to catch 75, 100 passes in the NFL? He
Yeah.
might.
You could win bar bets with that. Set an over under of 150, and nobody would ever take the under. Is that right? 146.
I had to triple check. You can go to the North Dakota State website. He had 101. I think 100. It was 41 last year for Green Bay, and it was 105 in college. Now, mind you, he rushed the ball like 49 times in college too. So there's just some there, but still 146 receptions.
We're talking about an explosively fantastic first 3 or 4 games.
Yeah,
at least one of which was on national TV, with Aaron Rodgers saying this was the guy who's finally making everything click, right, on national TV.
Yep.
So he'd be an easy guy to overrate. Who's an easy guy to underrate?
Easy guy to underrate at the wide receiver position. I'm going to say somebody, I'll give you a guy later in drafts, because fantasy managers have a lot of trouble later in drafts. Giving Adam Thielen. Thielen did very well in Minnesota last year. I think there's people saying, oh, he's going to Carolina, he's not going to do it. He's probably the best receiver that they have. He's not going to be a high volume guy. He's not going to do what he did at his peak in Minnesota, but I think he's going to be. I love building depth in rosters. So many people pay attention to the first 2 rounds and they forget about the last rounds and just kind of throw darts at the board. I want to build depth that allows you to survive bye weeks, depth that allows you to survive injuries, and having a guy like him who's going to be probably 120, 130 target guy and get him as late as you can, probably as a wide receiver 4, maybe later. I think it's a great way to stock up the late part of your draft.
Let's get about 2 wideouts in particular. That's who I like, but I could see arguments going both ways. One is Jahan Dotson with Washington. What is so intriguing to me about him, now I loved him at Penn State, and I watched where he was going to get drafted. I had my fingers crossed that the Washington organization would treat him right against all odds in the player development, but whatever. We'll leave those criticisms aside. What's intriguing to me about him is he led the team in red zone targets last year, yet obviously he's great at stretching the field. I mean, he's also very effective on those 20+ yard bomb throws. And if you could actually get a season where you get both of those going, so it seemed like there'd be a lot of scoring potential there. But do you think it's a good enough situation for him to where do you see him slotting in a draft?
Well, he was, I call passes thrown 20 or more yards downfield. I call that the stretch vertical level. And he was 27th in stretch vertical points per game in PPR leagues last year. So he's really good. He found the end zone in 6 games, and he scored. He led Washington to red zone and inside the 10-yard line scores. So a lot of that, I like Bieniemy's aggressive play calling approach. I think Bieniemy will inject a lot of the targets his way. Not sure of the quarterback situation. He's got a really tough schedule. So I got him as a 4 with wide receiver 3 upside. I think he's a really good 8th or 9th round pick if you can get him there. I wouldn't be surprised to see him outplay this, because I tend to be a bit conservative when it comes to negatives like this. But if his quarterback situation even becomes just halfway stable, then yeah, I think he can hit that wide receiver 3 upside.
Cool. All right, we're gonna race through this a little bit just because we have a few minutes left here. But sure. Among tight ends, there's one clear guy at the top of the list. I read what you wrote, and I was surprised that Dalton Schultz ranks 4th among tight ends in receptions over the past 3 years. And I also was interested in the fact he led Dallas in targets, receptions, touchdowns inside the 10-yard line and inside the red zone last year. Seems like a mighty tempting target. Do you think he could be a difference maker, even though he's getting drafted pretty low in drafts right now?
I call Green Bay matchups, and they stack him at multiple points during the season. So a ridiculously favorable schedule. He's probably the best pass catcher on that team. People got burned by him last year. I had him ranked pretty high, and I had people say, well, you still got him ranked that high. It's like, yeah, he didn't do quite as well as people had expected, because he did very well the year before. I just think when you're the top guy there and he can get a tight end and get 100+ targets, because that's usually the cutoff, as a cutoff point for, hey, this is going to be a starter, a really good starter caliber tight end. He's going to get that. And plus, when you've got his proven production, like I said, I think if you don't get one of the top guys and you're trying to play the value game at tight end, he's a fantastic player to get. You can get him around 9 or 10. I still think he's going to be mid-tier T1.
Give you the last word. Is there any underdog I haven't mentioned, any good underdog story that you'd like to bring to people's attention? Somebody going in the 8th round who should be in the 5th, or in the 5th round that should be the 2nd? Anybody that you wanna light up for people?
I don't understand why people don't like Kirk Cousins more. Look, I know he's a boring milquetoast quarterback, but the past 3 seasons, only 5 quarterbacks have scored more fantasy points than Kirk Cousins. And he's still in an offense he's throwing to Justin Jefferson. They added Addison. This is still going to be a really pass-centric team. They're going to score a lot of points. I'm looking again. He's boring. I don't, if you want the exciting pick, he's not the guy you want. But okay, a boring QB1 is going to give you probably 300 points or darn close to it, and give you for round 10 pick in the draft. I mean, I think that he should be getting a lot more play than he is.
Casey, thank you so much for your time. This has been fantastic. This is a huge help. Against all my instincts, I'm going to go out and get Dalton Schultz, and we'll see how it works out. And I don't think I can go as far as drafting Kirk Cousins, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you very much. Good luck with the rest of this preseason. I hope you manage to get some sleep somewhere along the line, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. People, there's a heavyweight championship on the line this weekend for the undisputed championship of the world in boxing. Not UFC, not whatever the hell Tyson Fury is doing this weekend. I don't even know what sport he participates in now. Boxing. All for the IBF, the IBO, the WBA, the WBO. It's all on the line with 2 compelling fighters. This is the kind of thing people used to put on tuxedos and go attend. Maybe you go watch on closed circuit television at the bar in the neighborhood and get really excited about. And there's reason to be excited about this specifically because here at the Underdogs, we talk about how it's much better as an underdog to be really good at one thing and kind of bad at everything than to be just a little bit below average at everything. If you're playing a better football team, would you rather just kind of be a C+ at everything, blocking, catching, running, throwing? Or would you rather be kind of a C at everything, but have the best kickoff returner? You have Cordero Patterson on your team. Obviously, it's the second choice because it gives you what's called a puncher's chance. That's why we call it a puncher's chance, because a boxer who can punch can knock a superior opponent out, even if everything else is going wrong. And this weekend, maybe, just maybe, that could happen. Okay, the heavyweight champion, is a terrific fighter. Guy named Alexander Usyk. You may have seen him. You may have seen him on YouTube more than you've seen his fights because he is known for things like juggling. His sparring partners are 2 guys, but they don't rotate. He spars with 2 heavyweights at the same time. That's on YouTube somewhere. He destroyed the cruiserweight division. Now he's moved up, and he's only had about 1 fight per year in the 4 years since he moved up from cruiserweight to heavyweight, and he's 36 years old. But he has amazing footwork. You watch him, you will be reminded of whoever your favorite athlete is with great balletic foot movement, say Marvin Harrison Sr. He's just around the ring all the time. He escapes trouble all the time. And he's going to need to do that because he's against, this weekend, 25-year-old, that's 11 years younger, Daniel Dubois, nicknamed Dynamite. That's how you know him. He's from Great Britain. He has knocked out his last 3 opponents. He's knocked out 95% of the people he's fought. He has power from the left, power from the right. Now, he's also gotten knocked out 3 years ago. He sustained some serious eye damage in a fight in 2020, where he also got up, kept fighting, even though he tore an ACL. The guy is tough. These are 2 fun fighters, a huge stylistic contrast. Experts that I've talked to give Dubois about a 10, maybe a little bit more than 10%. How you can quantify these things. These guys are 2 inches different in height, basically the same reach. Dubois looks and acts bigger. So, all you're left is with the punching stats. And Dubois is a pretty great puncher. Yes, he has a puncher's chance. And he is now, let's see, plus 650, while Usyk is minus 1100 to keep the title. So that puts it right in that puncher's chance of about 10%. This fight's taking place in Poland. I suggest you tune in. I suggest you have a lot of fun and see just how hard Dubois can hit Usyk. and, put Fury, Ngannou, and whatever the hell Conor McGregor's up to, and dare I say Floyd Mayweather, put them on the shelf for a while, get back to some old school boxing, watch the guy with the puncher's chance. There's our underdog pick for the weekend.